Hello and welcome everyone to the Bowl Mania episode 2. I was super thrilled about all the support on the last video, and I really appreciate it. If you like this series and you want to see more, click that subscribe button so that way you can get episode 3 of the series, as this video will only cover through the 29th of December, as we'll have our last roughly 15 games of the bowl season covered in the third episode of this series that'll come out sometime next week. And make sure that if you like this series as well, you can go and check out the NFL prediction videos that I have on the channel, as well as all-time Madden NFL franchise mode, and all sorts of stuff on the channel that you can go and check out. Make sure you tell everyone about this series, and we'll head right into it. So we'll start off with the Heart of Dallas Bowl on December the 26th. The Utah Utes sitting at 6-6, 6.5-point favorites over the West Virginia Mountaineers, who are 7-5. This will be a really big game, especially where I live in Utah. A lot of people really excited that the Utes and the Aggies are in the bowl season. So some of the key players to watch out for in this game: Zach Moss, the halfback for the Utah Utes. He's only been able to carry the football 20 or more times in 4 games, and the Utes are 3-1 when he has at least 20 carries in a football game. That is absolutely huge, and not a player to look for, but how about the coach, Kyle Whittingham, 10-1 in bowl season as a coach. That is absolutely amazing. Only 1 loss as a head coach during bowl season. That's huge. And then as for the West Virginia Mountaineers, a key player to look for, David Stills at wide receiver. He's a Blankenoff finalist for best wide receiver. He's at 18 touchdown catches this season. Only 1 player in the entire NCAA has over 14 other than him, and they sit at 17. So he has the most touchdown catches from a wide receiver out of everyone in the entire league, which is absolutely terrific. But another player to watch out for, Will Grier, probably will not start for the West Virginia Mountaineers because he had surgery on a broken finger. So that's going to leave the backup quarterback in the game for West Virginia, and that's going to be huge because you have to get the ball to your best player, David Stills, who's at wide receiver. And with the backup quarterback, that's going to be very difficult to accomplish. Now, if we look at some of the statistics here, the Utah Utes are 101st in third down conversions. If they are stuck in a lot of third down situations, they have, at least in previous games, proven that they can't really get the job done. They also have 2.1 giveaways per game. They turn the ball over a lot. They're 118th in the league in turnovers, and that is a bad thing. As for West Virginia, they're number 22 in the entire league in scoring. Of course, the Shootout Conference, or one of the 2 Shootout Conferences in the Big 12, they're averaging 34.2 points per game, 16th in total yards, averaging about 480 yards per game, and they're 10th in the league in pass offense. As for defense, they're really bad. Again, the Shootout Conference really kills those stats, about 114th in yards allowed, averaging about 466.3 yards allowed per game. It's pretty dismal defense, and I think that West Virginia is going to try and pull out all the stops to win this game, and they're going to throw the shit out of the football. But the biggest problem is that the West Virginia Mountaineers' backup quarterback is most likely going to start in this game. And on top of that, even if Will Grier does end up starting, which it is doubtful right now, I don't think he's going to be able to get the ball with that broken hand. So I don't think that it's going to happen. And I think Utah ends up winning this game by 10 points. There's not much else to say about that. So then we move on to our second game of this set of bowl games, and we got the Quick Lane Bowl in Detroit, Michigan, which will pit the 6-6 Duke Blue Devils, who are 4.5-point favorites, against the 8-4 Northern Illinois football team. And I gotta say, Northern Illinois, it's kind of hard to do these games, right? Because right now, Pardon the camera movement. But right now we've got the MAC taking on an ACC team. So Duke 6-6 against a very solid scheduling. In fact, they even beat ranked Northwestern, who is currently ranked, and they'll be in a future bowl prediction. But Northern Illinois, you don't have quite the same outlook. You can't really see the same performance out of it because they play a bunch of MAC teams. Some key players to look for in this game: Duke, both of their running backs. You've got Britton Brown and Sean Wilson, who had 53 combined carries in the last 2 games. They're absolutely incredible there. They've had 19 total rushing touchdowns, and the balance really takes the pressure off Daniel Jones, who has 14 passing touchdowns but 12 interceptions. And because of the running game being so effective, that's been able to help the Duke Blue Devils win these football games and become bowl eligible in the first place. So that's something to really look for in this game. As for Northern Illinois, you've got Sutton Smith, one of the best players in the entire league on the defensive side of the football. Number 1 in the entire league in sacks, having 14 sacks this season. He also has 28.5 tackles for a loss at defensive end. That's pretty good stuff right there for Northern Illinois. And then as for the Duke offense, you've got pretty much all of their offensive stats at about 80th in the league or lower, and it's really killing their team. They're 100th in the league in points, 95th in yards per game, 119th in yards per play. It's absolutely horrendous. Meanwhile, they've got the number 13 pass defense in the league, number 4 in the league in completion percentage, only allowing them to complete 49.82% of their passes. They're number 3 in the league in percent of passes from their opponent that got intercepted. They're averaging 4.95% of opponent pass attempts or per game being intercepted. It's pretty incredible stuff right there. Meanwhile, Northern Illinois, another very defensive football team, 12th in the league in rush defense. That's going to be huge up against this very good running attack for the Duke Blue Devils. They're in the top 30 in points allowed and yards per game, and they're 6th in the league in third down percentage. Their opponents only getting successfully completing about 28.26% of their third down attempts. So that's really going to be huge against this Duke offense that just can't really get a whole lot going. I say this is going to be a very defensive football game, but Duke just has better weapons on the offensive side of the football. Meanwhile, Northern Illinois, again, Duke has a top-tier defense. Northern Illinois just doesn't have the offensive weapons to stay in tune with the Duke Blue Devils. I say the Duke Blue Devils win a close, low-scoring game by just 3 points, but it's going to mainly be up to the fact of that their running game has to be able to move the football effectively for them to win this football game. Moving on now, we got the third game, which is going to be the Cactus Bowl in Phoenix, Arizona, between the Kansas State Wildcats, who are 7-5, 2.5-point favorites, against the UCLA Bruins, sitting 6-6. And well, key players for Kansas State, they've had some up and downs this season. Of course, with their quarterback Skylar Thompson, a true freshman, coming in for Jesse Ertz, who is now on IR and unable to finish out the season. He played significant time in the loss to West Virginia as well as wins to Oklahoma State and Iowa State. He had completed 74% of his passes in wins against Oklahoma State and Iowa State, who are 2 ranked teams at the time. Very, very good football teams there. Meanwhile, you've got a future NFL quarterback. Whether or not he starts, he's definitely going to be drafted. A lot of people wonder whether or not he's going to be a first or second rounder. Josh Rosen at quarterback for the UCLA Bruins. He has been the heart and soul of this offense. He has 3,717 passing yards, 10th in the league, 26th in rushing, 26 passing touchdowns, and 10 interceptions this season. He's been, kind of up and down. His team really trying to succeed where they, had failed a lot last season. And it's going to be very interesting because with that being said, they have the number 5 passing offense in the entire league, sitting at 345 yards passing per game. They're 26th in the league in scoring offense with 33.8 points per game and 17th in the league in yards. Going up against a Kansas State defense, 100th in yards allowed. Oh, sorry. Kansas State that was 100th in yards on offense. My apologies. 3rd in rush attempts allowed per game and 10th in yards rushing allowed per game. So the opponents that they have played this season, they have gone up against 3rd in the entire league in rush attempts, meaning that the opponent runs the football about 31 times per game. But they are 10th in the league in rush yards allowed, only allowing about 112 yards. That's absolutely insane. But against UCLA, who has a pass-first offense, their defensive stats for passing defense isn't anything spectacular. They don't really have anything there to really stop this team. And on offense, again, 100 in yards on offense, 40th in rush yards, and 110th in pass yards. You're going up against a very, very good offense. Obviously, UCLA's defense, pretty bad. Again, the shootout conference kind of kills that. 116th in scoring, 122nd in yards, 129th in rush yards, but 37th in pass defense, which is incredible, and that's going to be something that Kansas State's going to have to try and rely on in this game. And I think that Kansas State being able to pass the football as well as being able to run the football is better than UCLA only having the pass game. I think that this is going to be a really close, high-scoring game between two really good offenses, but I have UCLA losing this game by 6 against that really tough Kansas State football team. I think that the Kansas State running game is going to come up huge, especially against that weak UCLA run defense. And I think that's going to be ultimately the difference in this football game, especially from that aspect. Moving on now, we've got the Walk-Ons Independence Bowl in Shreveport, Louisiana, between the 8-4 Southern Mississippi Golden Eagles taking on the Florida State Seminoles, who are 6-6 and 15.5-point favorites. So I'm kind of surprised, not going to lie, that Florida State is favorites by 15.5 points. Now, their team hasn't been anything spectacular this season. Obviously, 6-6. They were ranked 3rd at the beginning of the season. I grant you their quarterback went down due to injury, and they've had some issues on that regard for the entire season, but that is no excuse for just dying. Let's look at some key players here for a second. Obviously, their Florida State freshman quarterback is going to, has had to rely on the running game all season. Halfback Cam Akers for Florida State has 930 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns, and he has been consistently running the ball well all season. And that's going to be the biggest key here. If Florida State's running game can get going and actually be able to produce on the scoreboard, that's going to be the difference on whether this is actually a 15.5-point win or not. Meanwhile, Southern Mississippi also has a really top-tier running back in Ito Smith, who has 13 rushing touchdowns, 453 yards, and 6 touchdowns in his final 3 games. He really got going in those last 3 games of the season. And I think that, Southern Mississippi has a very average offense in a very bad conference, at least compared to the ACC. But their defense, that's a different story. They're number 20 in the league in yards allowed, number 33 in rush defense. They are 119th in penalties, though. That's going to be a really bad thing that's going to really kill this team, is if they have a lot of penalties in this game. And they're 122nd in penalty yards a game. Almost 100 yards against them per game in penalties. That's crazy. Meanwhile, Florida State, 103 points, 103rd in points per game at 22. Very dismal offensive stats, obviously, with a lot of players being injured, especially their quarterback. But their defense, 26th in yards allowed, 38th in rush defense, 35 in pass defense, and I think that's going to be the ultimate key. Their offense doesn't necessarily have to be a top-tier offense against Southern Mississippi, so they don't really need that. But their defense is really solid. They don't have a lot of injuries or anything like that, and I think Florida State wins this game by 9 points. I don't think it's going to be a 15.5-point game, though it very well could be. I think that the Florida State Seminoles it's just going to be a closer game. I think Southern Mississippi really has a good defense there, and if, their offense is pretty average. I think that they can at least compete with Florida State, but Florida State wins it by 9. The fifth game coming up here in this second video is the New Era Pinstripe Bowl at Yankee Stadium. Now, this is going to be a really big game between the 7-5 Iowa Hawkeyes versus the 7-5 Boston College Eagles. The Hawkeyes favorites in this game by 3 points. Big game for them. And I think one of the biggest keys is going to be Iowa's defense. And Josey Jewell leads the Big Ten in tackles, and he's third in the NCAA. That is huge. He is an absolutely monstrous player on that defensive unit for Iowa, who's number 35th in the league in rush defense in a conference in the Big Ten where they have to fear teams like Ohio State and Wisconsin and Northwestern and teams that can run the football a lot. So being number 35 in rush defense in that conference is amazing. They also have a really interesting offense as well. Tight end Noah Fant has 486 yards and 10 touchdowns. He's averaging 17.4 yards per catch this season at tight end. This guy has been absolutely terrific for that Iowa offense, and he's going to need to come up huge if Iowa wants to win this football game. Meanwhile, Boston College, they can win this game because of running back A.J. Dillon. Now, I was, in a closet for the last, 3 months. But I hadn't heard of this guy until I did research for this very video. And this guy is a true freshman running back who got the start halfway through the season, and in the last 6 games has 1,099 yards rushing, where they've won 4 of their last 5 games when he got the start. That is crazy. Like, this dude, if he had started at the beginning of the season, could be one of the top 5 running backs in the entire league as a freshman. Like, I watched some film on this guy because obviously I look at this thing and I'm like, holy Jesus, like, this guy is amazing. Why have I not heard of this guy? I'm a Notre Dame fan, so obviously I should know a rival's big time running back. Why haven't I heard of this guy like at all? And I go and look at game film on this guy, and he is just an absolute monster as a true freshman. Boston College could really be in a good spot in another year or two with this guy at running back, especially if they can actually get him to run the ball quite a bit. And he could be one of the top teams in the ACC if they can build this team around him. And I think that's going to be huge because, this dude's insane. At least he's been insane in the last 6 games, but that's what matters. You're coming in to this game after the last 6, not the first 6. And this guy has been consistently a threat to every defense playing it for the last 6 weeks. And I think that that's going to be the ultimate difference. Iowa might be number 35 in rush defense, which is very impressive. But this guy just has to get, over 100 yards rushing, and this team wins. I say Boston College wins this game by 1 point, despite being 3-point underdogs. And I think it's going to happen at the very end of the football game. I think it's going to be a difference of just the one score. I think maybe Iowa kicks 2 field goals and then they score a touchdown at the end of the game, and that's going to ultimately be the difference. Boston College, to me, it's going to be entirely up whether the freshman A.J. Dillon can run the football consistently and well. If Iowa's number 35 rush defense and Jossie Joel gets this guy to less than 100 yards rushing, there's no way Boston College wins this game. But I think that he'll get there, and I think Boston College wins this game by a point, and I think it's going to be really, really close. Moving on now, we got the Foster Farms Bowl in Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, California, between the Arizona Wildcats sitting at 7-5, 3.5-point favorites against the Purdue Boilermakers, who are 6-6. And you can't talk about this game or Arizona in general without talking about Khalil Tate, because this guy came out of nowhere. Nobody really heard of this guy until this season, and he is on par with Lamar Jackson as the best dual-threat quarterbacks in the entire league. Dude has 1,289 passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. But he has 1,353 yards rushing and 12 touchdowns, leading his team in both categories as a quarterback. He's averaging 10 yards per carry in 133 carries. But health is going to be the real key. Can he stay healthy the entire game? Does he come out a lot? That's going to be a big key on whether or not Arizona can win this football game. Meanwhile, for Purdue, they also have a very good quarterback. They got Elijah Sindelar. I hope I'm not butchering that. Has 1,703 yards, 14 touchdowns, 6 interceptions as a sophomore quarterback? That's crazy good. That's crazy good. The problem is you're a sophomore now, and your potential is when you're a junior or senior, which is not this year. It's not this year. And I think that while they do have a really solid quarterback, it's not measuring up to how good Khalil Tate is. Arizona has the number 4 ranked rush offense in the league, averaging 308.4 yards rushing per game. And number 4, so, I mean, you're trying to think here, who are the top 3 option offenses? Georgia Tech, Navy, Army, the usual. But they're up there, and they're 7th in the league in points per game, and they're doing it running the football, which is very impressive. They have 40 points per game, which is 7th in the entire league. All the other teams ahead of them pass the football a lot. But they do it running the football, which is just really impressive. But their defense leaves a lot to be desired. Their pass defense is number 115 in the country. And if they're going to stop Elijah Sindelar, they're going to need to play pass defense. But if you look at Purdue, they're number 82 in pass defense and number 28 in rush defense, which is very impressive. And that could definitely prove to be a factor in this game. However, on offense, they're number 91 in points per game and number 73 in yards per game, which is pretty bad, especially considering, that they need to be able to gain yards in order to win this game, especially against this dismal Arizona defense. I think it's going to be a pretty exciting game until the fourth quarter. Then Khalil Tate's going to take his team. He's going to grab it by the horns, and he's going to win this game for the team. I think Arizona wins it by 17. I think a late mistake by Purdue makes this game a little bit larger on the scoreboard than it actually was, but that's what I have in this game. Then we have the next game, which is going to be the Academy Sports and Outdoors Texas Bowl in Houston, where the Texas Longhorns, basically at home at 6-6, take on the Missouri Tigers, who are 7-5, 3-point favorites in this game. Former Big 12 team in Missouri taking on Texas. It's been quite a while since these two teams saw one another. I think that one of the biggest keys for Texas is going to be Colin Johnson, their wide receiver. 725 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. Now, that's not a lot for a season, but he had 191 yards against USC in some of the biggest games. Winner, not necessarily meaning that they'll win, but some of the biggest games that he's had, this team has competed against teams that a lot of people thought Texas would never compete with, such as USC. He had 191 yards receiving in that game. But Missouri, their offense is a lot better, in my opinion. Drew Lock, the quarterback for Missouri, is number 1 in the entire league in passing touchdowns. 43 passing touchdowns this season, 12 interceptions, 3,695 yards passing. It's been absolutely wild. And they're currently on a 6-game win streak where every single game they've scored at least 45 points in. Missouri, if they can hit that 45 points, they win this game. I have no doubt in my mind. If they hit 45 points against Texas, they win this game. But I don't think that that'll necessarily happen. But I just don't think Texas is prepared. They have the number 107th ranked pass defense in the entire league. That's terrible. And against one of the best players in the entire league throwing the football, you just can't. You can't pick Texas to win this game. I think Texas loses by 14 points in this game, in a very high-scoring game, at least at the beginning, and then Texas just falls behind. I don't think that they'll be able to win this game. They'll try. They'll do their best, but I don't think Missouri has any shot of losing this game. Moving on now to the 8th bowl game of this second video. We've got the Military Bowl in Annapolis, Maryland, between the Virginia Cavaliers sitting at 6-6, 1-point favorites over the 6-6 Navy Midshipmen, who are at home. Look at that. That's pretty nice. Virginia sitting right now. They're pretty good so far, but they barely squeak in to the bowl season. Linebacker Micah Kaiser for Virginia has been absolutely terrific. 132 tackles, 5 sacks, 9.5 tackles for loss. That's his 3rd straight season with at least 100 tackles, 9 tackles for loss, and 5 sacks. At linebacker, that's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And he has been absolutely unbelievable for Virginia all season long. And going up against the option, this guy is going to have to come up huge in this game. And he's going to have to make a lot of tackles on this rushing attack of Navy. Zach Abbey, the quarterback for Navy, has been absolutely terrific this season. Surprisingly, 805 passing yards. You don't see that a lot out of Navy. And he's also got 1,325 yards rushing and 14 touchdowns. He's the quarterback for the team. Navy obviously has the number 1 rush offense in the league at 343 rushing yards per game on average. They're also number 11 in penalties, but that's a good thing. They don't get a lot of penalties. The higher the rank, the better they are, period. And they're number 11 in the league in that. And that is something that you really need in this league, is a disciplined football team. Meanwhile, Virginia, number 11 in pass attempts against them, or number 11 in pass attempts in general, but they're number 42 in yards. That is bad. That is really bad. And they have the number 78 rush defense in the entire league, which is really dismal, especially against the option. But on the bright side, Navy has lost 5 of their last 6, including the game to Army, which I didn't think was going to happen, to be honest with you. But that was a really exciting game. I think it's going to be all up to whether Micah Kaiser and this Virginia defense can stop the run, which they haven't really been able to do all season. I don't think it's going to happen again here. Navy wins it by 7. Then we have the Camping World Bowl in Orlando, Florida, between the 22nd ranked Virginia Tech Hokies sitting at 9-3 and the Oklahoma State Cowboys, number 19 in the country, also 9-3 and 4.5-point favorites over the Hokies. Now this is going to be a really big offense versus defense football game, because you have Virginia Tech, one of the best defenses, versus Oklahoma State, one of the best offenses. But I think for Virginia Tech, the key player for them is going to be Josh Jackson, their quarterback. because while their defense can definitely play up to par, he's going to ultimately be the one that has to score points and keep up with this Oklahoma State offense. And one of the best, if not the best quarterback in the entire league, Mason Rudolph. I know a lot of people, think I'm crazy for saying that, but this guy is absolutely insane. 4,553 yards, number one in the league in that category, 35 touchdown passes and 9 interceptions. That's incredible numbers from this guy, and he's number one in passing yards over everyone else. But you got Virginia Tech, Josh Jackson, 2,473 yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And in the ACC, that's pretty insane. That's not the shootout conference. That's a very defensive conference to be in, especially, with the turnover chain, with Clemson's defensive line. The ACC is a very defensive-oriented conference, especially right now. So I think that's going to be coming into play here. But speaking of defense versus offense, Virginia Tech has the number 5 ranked defense in terms of point allowed, 11th in yards allowed per game, number 1 on third down. They're number 1 in the entire league on third down. Their opponent only gets a first down on third down 24.8% of the time. That's crazy. They have the number 27 ranked pass defense, and that's a scary number right there, especially against Oklahoma State's offense. Number 3 in the league in points, number 2 in the league in yards per game, number 13 in the league on third down conversions, and number 1 in the league in pass offense. And I think Virginia Tech's defense is going to have to keep up with that high-powered passing attack of Oklahoma State, and they're just not going to be able to do it. Mason Rudolph gets it done, Oklahoma State by 17. And I think that's going to be, just like a previous prediction I made, I think that this game is going to be a lot closer than the scoreboard says. But at the very end of the game, Oklahoma State pulls away. The Alamo Bowl in San Antonio, Texas, another top ranked game right here. Number 13, Stanford, who lost to USC in the conference championship game that sends them down to 9-4 against number 15 TCU, who lost in the conference championship game, sitting at 10-3. TCU 2.5-point favorites in this game. So this is going to be a very interesting game as well. You've got key players. Let's just start with TCU, the not so obvious one. We've got Kenny Hill, the quarterback for TCU, sitting at 2,838 yards passing, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. But a lot of interesting stories about this team and this guy, because a lot of people think that he might not even play in this game. He's a senior. This would be his last game, but a lot of people, at least analysts and stuff that I've read during my research, say that he very well might not play this game. More than likely, they believe that they're going to start thinking about the future and playing some of their younger quarterbacks. And that is going to be a huge difference if that happens. Meanwhile, Stanford, we obviously got Heisman finalist Bryce Love, 1,973 rushing yards, number 2 in the league in rushing yards. And in the Pac-12, that's crazy. 17 rushing touchdowns. That's absolutely wild. And it's going to be another one of those defense versus offense games. TCU is number 6 in the entire league in rush defense, only allowing 106.2 yards per game, and number 14 in points allowed. Meanwhile, Stanford has number 34 in rush offense with 205.6 yards per game, and number 4 in giveaways. That means they don't turn the ball over a lot. So that is absolutely huge. And I think that it's going to depend on Kenny Hill, because this defense and this offense are going to be very hand in hand, and it's going to be a very close game. But if Kenny Hill plays, TCU wins it by 3. If Kenny Hill does not play or gets taken out at any point in the game, TCU loses this game by 3. That's how big of a difference I think that this quarterback has. Now, I know he's not the best player on the team or anything, but he is going to be the difference maker on whether they win or lose this game. That's just going to be how it is. Moving on now to the next one, we've got the San Diego County Credit Union Holiday Bowl. In San Diego, California, we got 19th ranked Washington State sitting at 9-3, 2.5-point favorites over 16th ranked Michigan State, who are 9-3. Both teams have had really good seasons this year. We got quarterback Luke Falk for Washington State in terms of key players to look for. 13th in the entire NCAA in passing yards at 3,593. 10th in the league in touchdowns at 30, and number 6 in the league in interceptions at 13. That's a bit rough right there to have the 6th most interceptions in a season. That's a little much. Meanwhile, Michigan State, they also have a very quarterback-oriented offense with Brian Lewark. I think that's how you pronounce that. 2,580 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He's been pretty accurate this season so far. They like to run the football a lot, but I think he's going to be the key player to watch for in this game. In terms of Washington State, their offense has been absolutely incredible. Number 2 in the entire league in pass offense. Obviously, only losing out to Oklahoma State. Then they're number 129 in rush offense, so they don't run the football at all. So that's not going to be much of a big deal for them. They're number 39 in points scored per game, despite having the number 2 pass offense, which is a bit worrisome. But they have the number 11 pass defense in that shootout conference of the Pac-12, which is absolutely crazy. Only allowing about 180 pass yards per game. They're number 8 in the entire league in sacks per play, averaging a sack on 9.43% of the plays. That's pretty insane. Meanwhile, Michigan State, 98th in points per game, 85th in yards per game. Not a very offensive-oriented team, but number 8 in the entire league in yards allowed, and the number 31 pass defense. So again, it's going to be another defense versus offense game, and this is college football, which means I usually lean towards the offense. If it were the NFL, I'd probably lean towards the defensive team, but this is a very offensive-oriented sport, and I think that that's going to be the difference here. Washington State wins a shootout by just 4 points. The Belk Bowl in Charlotte, North Carolina, between the 7-5 Wake Forest Demon Deacons sitting at 3-point favorites over the 7-5 Texas A&M Aggies on the 29th of December, our final day of the bowl games, at least on this video. There will be a third video sometime next week. Key players to watch for Wake Forest, you've got John Wolford, the quarterback, sitting at 2,792 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, but he can also run the ball, 615 rushing yards, 10 touchdowns, rushing the football. He has been a very dual-threat quarterback to watch out for. A&M's going to really have to look at that. And for Texas A&M, they got 2 players to really look out for. Christian Kirk, one of the best wide receivers in the league. He's been really held short this season. 730 yards receiving, 7 touchdowns on 58 receptions. He's one of the better receivers in the league. If you've watched some of these catches that he's made, it's been absolutely impressive, but they've really locked down on him this season with a lot of double teams and defensive coverage schemes built around stopping this guy, which is going to put most of the pressure on the true freshman quarterback Nick Starkel, who's coming in off of an injury to another freshman quarterback, and he's earned the starting position. He has a 1,294 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. He's only played 5 games, though, so keep that in mind. But that's going to be ultimately really huge in this game, is whether or not Nick Starkel can play well. Wake Forest is number 119th in pass defense. So this is what I'm talking about. Christian Kirk and Nick Starkel, if they can hook up a lot in this game, it's going to be an easy Texas A&M win. They're number 27 in yards on offense. They're number 32 in points, and they're tied for 10th in turnovers, which is a good thing. It's a good thing. They only average about 0.9 turnovers a game, which is actually really good in this league, tied for 10th, obviously. Texas A&M, though, 58th in yards allowed, 60th in pass offense, and 54th in giveaways. That's kind of dismal, but I think That 119th in pass defense for Wake Forest is ultimately going to be the difference. I think Texas A&M, they hook up a lot in this game. They win it by 11. That's what I have for this one. Then we've got our last 4 bowl games for this episode. We've got the Sun Bowl in El Paso, Texas, between number 24 North Carolina State sitting at 8-4, 6.5-point favorites in this game, taking on the 7-5 Arizona State Sun Devils. There we go. Key players to look out for in this game: North Carolina State's defensive end Bradley Chubb has been absolutely incredible. 10 sacks, 72 tackles at defensive end. At defensive end, he has 72 tackles this season. That is crazy good from a defensive end. He's one of the better and more well-scouted players for the NFL. He's definitely going to play a big factor in this game. Arizona State's linebacker Christian Sam, you want to talk about defensive players getting scouted, 127 tackles. That's a Pac-12 high, and that's 26 more than the next player in the Pac-12 in tackles. North Carolina State and Arizona State's defense are going to be the key here. Number 5 in opponents' rush attempts per game. North Carolina State's defense has to handle the run game a lot. The 5th most in the league. Their opponents average 32.5 rush attempts per game, but they're 26th in the league in rush defense, only allowing 132.2 yards per game. Meanwhile, North Carolina State has the 30th ranked pass offense in the league, 28th in yards, and they're really going to have to make that work. But you know what's really bad? North Carolina State is going to have to make that work without getting into the red zone. They're number 119th in red zone scoring, which means when they get into the red zone, they only get a score. A score in general, 71.43% of the time. That is horrible. That is horrible. One of the worst in the league. Meanwhile, you've got Arizona State, who's 103rd in the league in defense. 116th in the league in pass defense against the 30th ranked pass offense. However, Arizona State's offense is incredible. 39th in the league in yards, 7th in the league in penalties, which is really good. But the number 1 red zone scoring offense, they score points on 97.78% of their red zone trips this season, which is incredible. The problem is that 103rd defense is just not going to be able to stop the number 28 offense in the league. NC State wins this one by 20. Not even a contest here, especially because NC State's defense can actually stop Arizona State's offense. I think that's going to be the ultimate key here. Next up, we've got the Music City Bowl in Nashville, Tennessee, between the 7-5 Kentucky Wildcats and the 21st ranked Northwestern Wildcats. 9-3, 7.5-point favorites over Kentucky. And because this isn't basketball, famous words right there, because this isn't basketball, Northwestern's going to win this game, and they're going to do it by a lot. Kentucky had a 6-2 start to the season. They were looking really good, but then they lost 3 of their last 4 games. They were destroyed by Louisville. Meanwhile, Northwestern has had a 7-game win streak. They've only lost to Duke, Wisconsin, and Penn State. Duke in the second game of the season at Duke, and they've lost against Wisconsin and Penn State, both ranked teams, looking very good this season. Key players to watch: Benny Snell Jr. for Kentucky at halfback, tied for 5th in the league in rushing touchdowns with 1,318 yards. Northwestern has Patty Fisher, who has 110 tackles, 4 forced fumbles, and an interception at linebacker. He's been absolutely terrific, and Northwestern will win this game by about 28. Moving on to the Arizona Bowl in Tucson, or Tucson. I don't know. Maybe I just butchered that for you. Sorry about that. New Mexico State sitting at 6-6, taking on Utah State, who is also 6-6. New Mexico State 4-point favorites in this game. Key players to watch: you've got one of the best quarterbacks in the entire league, at least in terms of statistics, in Tyler Rogers. 5th in the NCAA in passing yards at 3,825 yards, 26 touchdowns. but 16 interceptions. That's really bad. And against Utah State, Jalen Davis, their cornerback, has 5 interceptions this season. 3 of them are pick sixes. He is definitely going to be one to watch out for, especially with Tyler Rogers throwing 16 interceptions. New Mexico State is bowl eligible for the first time since 1960, so this is a really big game. I think Tyler Rogers is really going to have to come out swinging here. But I think what ultimately is going to be the difference, Utah State is number 8 in the league in takeaways. That's really what's going to be the difference here. And I think with how many interceptions Tyler Rogers has, Jalen Davis and this Utah State defense is going to have to come in big. I think Utah State wins this football game by a touchdown. I think the defense is really going to be a factor here for the Aggies. I think they can get the job done. And the biggest game of the episode, in fact, of this whole series to this point, the Cotton Bowl in not the Cotton Bowl. I mean, they're in Arlington, Texas. They're at AT&T Stadium. Not the Cotton Bowl. For the Cotton Bowl. We got number 8 USC, the Pac-12 champs, sitting at 11-2, versus number 5 Ohio State, sitting at 11-2, the Big Ten champions. So this is a big-time game between two conference champions, two of the two teams that really wanted to get into the playoff. They obviously don't. This is going to be a huge game here. We've got key players to watch out for. Obviously, Sam Darnold, the guy who everyone thought was going to be the number 1 pick. He had a lot of turnovers at the beginning of the season, one of the most in the league. And he has 3,787 yards passing, 26 touchdowns, 12 interceptions. But here's the thing. He only has 3 picks in his last 7 games. He's been getting a lot better after that horrid start to the season. He slowly started to develop and rely on their running back, Ronald Jones II, who has 1,486 yards rushing and 18 rushing touchdowns, which is absolutely incredible. Meanwhile, Ohio State also has a quarterback running back pair that is going to be important. J.T. Barrett, 2,939 yards passing, 35 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He has 732 rushing yards and 10 touchdowns as well. Meanwhile, halfback J.K. Dobbins has 1,364 yards and 7 touchdowns rushing the football, and he's going to need to take the pressure off of J.T. Barrett if they want to win this game. USC's offense, number 12 in the league. They have the number 35 rush offense and number 18 pass offense. They're a very balanced attack, but they're number 102 in turnovers because of this quarterback who has been able to turn the ball over a lot, averaging almost 2 turnovers a game, which is insane. Meanwhile, you've got Ohio State's defense. Comparing to this, they have the number 7 defense in the entire league in terms of total yards. Number 7 rush defense and number 15 pass defense. That is going to be huge against this USC offense. And then you compare this Ohio State offense to USC's defense. Ohio State number 5 in the league in scoring, 7th in yards, 13th in rushing, and 31st in passing. Meanwhile, USC's defense has the 4th best red zone defense in the entire league, only allowing a score on 69.57% of the red zone trips. They're 51st in run defense, though, and 91st in pass defense. They're basically the New England Patriot defense of college football, where they don't allow a score, but they allow lots of yards, and that's just going to be too much. Their offense isn't the Patriots, obviously. So they're going to get destroyed in this game. But I think it's going to be a lot closer on the scoreboard than the game is going to actually be, I guess. Ohio State is just too good of a team. I think they beat USC by 7 points. But I think USC, never really has a chance to win this football game. Well, thank you all for watching this episode. Make sure you click that thumbs up button down below and leave a comment in the comment section letting me know who you think is going to win this bowl season. Go check out the first episode if you haven't already, so that way you can see my predictions for the first set of bowl games up through the through the 24th of December, and we'll see you next time.